Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate the time. I always am a little bit disappointed to start speaking at these things because there's lots of great things happening at the tables, and that's one of the purposes of all coming together. So thank you all for being here today. I first wanted to recognize some of our elected officials and dignitaries that are in the room today. Hold your applause till the end, please, because there's a lot of them. But from the city, we have Council President Marshak, Councilmember Miller, Councilmember Nino, Councilmember Larry Squire, Councilmember Jackson from the City Council. So thank you all for being here today. We have Representative Johnson and Representative Conley here with us this morning as well. And I saw Senator Spreitzer walk in, so he's here as well. Thanks for making the trip from Beloit. Appreciate that. Our school superintendent, Mark Holtzman, is here. Don't make a move too fast. You might be a little sore. You ran a little ways the other day. So congratulations, by the way, Mark. It's a big accomplishment. Blackhawk Tech President Tracy Prunier is here, and thank you for the use of the room. Really appreciate it. I saw you earlier. And then from the county, we have County Administrator Josh Smith and Supervisor Sue Ryan is here. So thank you for being here this morning. And we have Justin Williams from Senator Baldwin's office. So thanks for being here. So again, please join me in a round of applause for recognizing the record. I would like Mick Gilbertson, our partner from the Forward Janesville Foundation, to come up and say a few words.
Good morning, and thank you. On behalf of Forward Janesville, I'd like to thank the City of Janesville and Kevin Lahner for holding these leadership breakfasts. Forward Janesville and Forward Foundation feels these are important and will help move our community forward. The Forward Foundation believes in the importance of connecting on a regular basis and will be sponsoring the balance of these breakfasts throughout the year. The Forward Foundation is a charitable arm of Forward Foundation and has recently raised an economic development fund called the Vision Forward Fund. At a Forward Janesville board retreat this year, 3 specific initiatives were identified. One of these focuses is housing. We believe housing is important because our members represent over 30,000 employees, and when we talk to our members, workforce constraints is a key issue. Housing inventory at all levels is one of these constraints. The constraint is a result of a series of interrelated factors: the recession, suppressed wages, industry constraints, lack of innovation, and zoning barriers. The housing crisis is not only an issue here, but across the U.S. The difference is how we collectively do something about this, and opportunities and efforts such as this breakfast is a great first step. Forward Janesville will work as the lead economic and community development organization to create positive change with our partners on this initiative, along with our 5 core areas of economic development, workforce, education and assistance, government relations, community partnerships, and member services. We feel this will help ensure the continued health and prosperity of our businesses, industries in the city. Thank you, and we're looking forward to a great morning.
Thank you, Mick. Before we get started with our program, I wanted just to share a few things as to what's going on in the city. Some very exciting things are going on with the city right now, and I wanted to share them all with you before we get started with our program. So one of the things that you're going to start seeing some things about is that we are beginning the update of our zoning code. Now, I know it's very exciting for you. Don't get too excited, but this is a really important process for the city because we have an old zoning code. We just went through the update to our comprehensive land use plan, and now the next thing that follows is our zoning code. And these are things that dictate how things get built, when they get, how they look and feel on a lot and those sorts of things. And so we're going to have a very extensive public process, meetings with stakeholders as we go through the zoning code update. Many of you in this room will be invited to participate, and we strongly encourage you to do so. It's a very important thing for the city as we move forward to address our zoning code and modernize that for what we want to do for the future. And it relates directly to what we're talking about today in terms of affordable housing, so it's a very important process for us. I know, really exciting stuff. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, of course, the Woodman Center is going forward. I didn't check in with Mike, but I'm just going to make the assumption that it's on time and under budget. So I think George Cullen's here. I'm going to make that assumption. So we'll just keep. So we are very excited about that. If you go over to the site now, very different. Obviously, they're moving things along very well. And we're moving down to the next phase of that process where we are evaluating our management plan and what we're going to be doing with that in the future. And so that is very exciting. We have lots of partners. Christine is here from the Visitors Bureau, and we are really looking forward to doing that. So that is very exciting, and we're happy to see that get going. The other thing that I just want to mention is, of course, we recently approved $2 million for the Children's Museum of Rock County, a really important project for our community and our downtown. I know that the county board is going to be considering funding here coming up soon, and I would just appreciate it if you haven't got on board that campaign to do so. John Westfall, he was RSVP'd. I don't know if he's here today, but you all know John, and I would appreciate if you reach out and consider getting that project over the finish line for the city and the county. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, the second and last thing I wanted to mention is that the city is starting a new program as it relates to the development community, and we're launching what's known as our Development Assistance Group. And it's really just a way to connect with developers early on in the process as they're considering projects and get feedback early in the process to help make things go smoothly as projects move through our development process. We're going to host, they're basically weekly meetings that we host. We'll host them every Wednesday. And developers, architects, engineers, landowners who want to get feedback on a project early in the process can set up a meeting. You can contact Dwayne Sherrick with our planning division, Brian Schweigel, and they will help guide you in getting into those meetings. And what we're going to do is just make sure that all the professionals from the city are around the table to give you feedback so that we can identify issues early and make those projects go smoothly through the planning process and ultimately to approval at the Planning Commission or City Council or whatever it may be. So we're excited about that process, and this is a result of feedback that we received from the development community about things that we could do better to move things forward. And so this is one thing that we're going to be trying here. And that'll start essentially the moment I get done speaking. So if you want to give Dwayne a call, we are happy to set up those meetings and get those things forward. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is obviously there's a lot of discussion around the acquisition of the GM Jatco site and other properties in that area. And so just so that everybody knows, what we're doing as it relates to that is we're using the condemnation statutes and the state statutes, which allows us to condemn these properties under an environmental, under an environmental blighted status. And so that's what we are doing. And that process that we're utilizing is a somewhat compressed time frame to be able to acquire those properties, and it's very procedural at what you have to do and what steps you have to take, okay? And so the first step in that process was the resolutions that the City Council passed to identify the 7 properties and to start off that condemnation process. After that resolution was approved, then the property owners are notified, and they're notified of the process that is about to begin in terms of acquiring those properties by the city. And there are lots of protections in place for the property owners and business owners to make sure that people are treated fairly in this process. And so what's happening right now is the beginning of that process. And so there's not going to be a lot of big splashy news about it. The things that happen now is the appraisal process. So what happens with this condemnation process is that the city gets appraisal, and then the landowners get the opportunity to get an appraisal at the city's cost. okay? And then once that occurs, then there's a period of where we can negotiate on the price of that property, okay? Once, after that period has happened, and if we can't come to an agreement on the property, the city makes what's known as a jurisdictional offer. And then once that jurisdictional offer is made, the city will essentially own the property. And after that, the dispute is related to how much the city is going to pay for those properties. So that's how this condemnation process works. And so from now until we get to the point of purchasing the property, there's not going to be a lot of big splashy news. We're going to be making offers. We're going to be getting appraisals done. We're going to be doing assessments, and then they'll kick off a process of working with the property owners. There's also relocation benefits. So if there is an existing business, and there obviously is one, a relocation specialist works with that business to locate a like property and assist them in moving as part of the process. So that is a part of, this is the condemnation statute that we're using, and that's how that process will go. Concurrent to all of that, we are working with our state and federal partners to identify grant opportunities to assist us in what we know is going to be an extensive environmental cleanup of those sites. And so that is happening at the same time. And so my economic development director is here, Jimsy Coborn. She's leading that charge, and God bless her. There's a lot of applications and meetings and other things that she is working through, because we all know that state and federal government processes are really easy to navigate. Slightly worse than the city, we'll just say that. So that is the process that we're going through. So once those properties are acquired, we'll have to go through a process of cleaning up the environmental contamination. Subsequent to that, and once we get done with that process, then we will engage with the community and a community planning process for what we want those properties to be for the future. We are in this for the long haul. It's going to take a long time, but we think that, quite frankly, the previous property owners have had enough time. They haven't met their commitments. It's been well documented about their lack of compliance with our own ordinances and the violations they've continuously had with the DNR and their lack of paying taxes and fees over the years that they've owned the property. And so as I've said before, we just think that Janesville deserves better, and we're moving this project forward in this way. And so that is what is happening as relates to the GM Jacko site. The news on those things will come in drips and drabs. There's not going to be big splashy things that we're going to be doing. In this process right now, obviously, we're dealing with making offers to property and all those sorts of things. There's not going to be a lot of big public news about those things. But as they move through the process, you will see us working with the city council to make jurisdictional offers if we get to that, acquiring the properties and moving that process forward. So I just want to make sure that folks here knew about that and how those processes go. One of the questions that I've gotten about that is that, why couldn't you just negotiate with the property owners? And the way the statutes work is you can't pre-negotiate prior to moving to the condemnation and the relocation orders that the council passed. And so you can't engage, otherwise you could run afoul of the state statutes, and then you wouldn't be able to follow the statutes that we're choosing to follow. So that's why we didn't necessarily give anybody a heads up that we were doing this. We prepared, we passed the relocation orders, and we're moving down that road. The negotiation process will take place once the appraisals are done. But that's what I want to talk about for GM Jacko, but we have a great program for you today. I'm going to ask Adam and Kelly to come up and join me up here. Today, you're going to hear from Kelly Bedessem, who is our Director of Housing Services with the City of Janesville. And Kelly is in charge of all of our things related to housing and all the programming that we do related to housing. So she manages our CDBG funds, she manages our rental assistance, our housing inspections programs, and over the course of her career with the City of Janesville has implemented a variety of unique and creative programs in order to promote affordable housing and address housing issues throughout the community. And then we also have Adam Templer. Adam Templer is the Vice President of Development for the Bear Real Estate Group. And the Bear Real Estate Group is a family of companies that provides innovative real estate solutions to build better communities. And they do development, construction, property management, single-family homes, and brokerage. Adam leads their affordable housing development efforts. Over the past 10 years, he has led more than 35 affordable housing developments, which encompass 3,500 units and $101 billion of total development costs. And so we're really happy to have them here today to talk about this issue. And I'm going to have Kelly come up first, and then you'll hear from Adam. And I failed and I didn't go to the welcome slide. So, there you go.
So good morning. As Kevin mentioned, my name is Kelly Bedessem. I'm the Housing Services Director for the City of Janesville. I've been at the city for 23 years, started out as a property maintenance inspector, then went into our Building Services Division and did inspections and plan review, and now I'm the Housing Services Director for the city. So within our division, as Kevin mentioned, we do multiple programs. We have a rental assistance program, state and federal grants, a vacant building program, property maintenance, and we support affordable housing development. We do this all with a team of 9.5. So we have the Neighborhood and Community Services Director, Jennifer Petrozello, is here today. She is in charge of housing, transit, and our recreation department. Myself, 2 rental assistance housing specialists, a housing program specialist, which is a vacant position right now, hoping to fill soon. And then we have 3 property maintenance inspectors who also run our vacant building program. And then we have an administrative assistant who keeps it all together for all of us. We are funded through both general fund and state and federal grants. General fund, our property maintenance, which is housing, nuisance, and zoning regulations, and our vacant building program are the only things within our division that are funded by general fund dollars. Everything else is grant funded, so our proactive inspection program, our rental assistance, our state and federal grants, and our affordable housing development. So this is the reality of what it looks like to purchase a home in the city of Janesville. As you can see, the top line, the green line there, is the cost of a median house to purchase here in our community right now. Clearly, that's a very sharp line, whereas the blue line is the median income, household income in the city of Janesville. So clearly, it's very difficult with the income rising as slowly as it is to keep up with the cost of housing. Median house to purchase in our community right now, and this was based on the data that I received from March, is $279,000. With a 30% down or $30,000 down payment, that's about $2,400 a month in housing costs with taxes and insurance. Income required for that to be considered affordable is $87,000 a year for a household. However, our median income in the city of Janesville is just over $66,000 a year. So over 14,000 Janesville households cannot afford to purchase a median home. So if you can't buy a house, you rent, right? Median cost to rent a 2-bedroom, according to the census data, which we all know is a little bit dated, is $1,000. I think that's very conservative. Average utilities on a 2-bedroom, also conservatively, is about $215 a month. So the total rent is $1,215. The income required for affordability on that is $46,000 a year. And more than a third of our residents in the city of Janesville earn less than that, in less than $49,000 annually for that household. As a mom of 2 boys who are currently in college, I've always encouraged them to do what you love, do what's gonna make you happy, because you're gonna have to work for a very long time. So my oldest son, who's a junior over at UW-Whitewater, he, after he decided that Harry Potter trivia was not going to be a career for him, he decided he wants to teach, and he wants to teach history, so he's going to school for that. However, if he's fortunate enough to land a job here locally, he won't be able to afford rent. So he'll be in my basement for the next however many years. So what does the city do? The programs that we do to address the needs are things that I described: the rental assistance program. It's a housing choice voucher program. We have down payment and closing cost assistance for those who are able to purchase a home. We have a homeowner rehabilitation program. And then we support local service providers. Some of them are here today. And we do affordable housing development. So with the rent assistance program, we support about 500 families every single month towards paying their rent. Participants will pay 30% of their income towards rent. Over 90% of our participants in our program do have an income source of some type, be it Social Security, disability, job. We distribute over $3.5 million annually towards landlords for that portion of the rent. 64% of our participants are either elderly and/or have a disabled person living in the household. We have a couple of other programs that mirror our rent assistance program. We have a VASH program, which is a veterans program. We help veterans who have served our country to pay for that portion of their rent as well. We also have a very exciting foster youth program. So anyone who has been in foster care and has left foster care, we can support them with their housing. Those all look a little unique in each of their different programs, but very similar to our housing choice voucher program. We work on state and federal grants. So the two major grants that we have are Community Development Block Grant Funds, or commonly referred to as CDBG, and our Home Investment Partnership. Those are annual allocations that we get by some magic formula that the federal government has decided that we receive. As you can see, it has been pretty steady over the last 10 years or so. We receive approximately $500,000 to $600,000 in CDBG funds. And the home funds that we receive are a home consortium, so it's ourselves, the City of Beloit, and the County of Rock that we distribute between those organizations. Through the CDBG program, we work on the homeowner rehabilitation program. We do some affordable housing development, although it's a little more difficult with CDBG funds. And then we support area service providers. The homeowner rehabilitation program, since 2015, we've rehabbed 173 projects here in the city of Janesville. Those can be anything from siding and windows and roofs to accessibility to rehabilitating a kitchen, a bathroom, things like that, so that people can stay in their homes, and we assist with that. We do affordable housing development. We assist development of predominantly single-family homes, but we also do some multifamily with our CDBG funds. We do have some funds within our budget for 2024 to assist with a project. In addition to that, we had working with ECHO to do a rehabilitation of a single-family home on High Street just across from the newly redone park. And that will be used for transitional living for households from this point forward. We also support service providers in their missions. We are required to use 15% of our grant towards supporting those service providers. And so since 2016, we've distributed over $1.7 million to our local service providers. The 2024 grant awards are for ECHO for their emergency rent assistance, HealthNet for medical, dental, and behavioral health, Community Action for their Thrive program, which was formerly called Fatherhood Initiative, and the Boys and Girls Club for after-school programming. The Home Investment Partnership grant is more geared towards development. And so we do both single-family and multifamily development with those funds. We have a long-term relationship with Wisconsin Partnership for Housing Development. We refer to them as WPHD. They've rehabilitated 17 homes in our community, constructed 10 new. They have one that they should be working on very shortly. The council just approved the transfer of the lot this week. They have 10 rental units here in town that they own, developed, rehabilitated, and manage. And then we have, working with that agency alone, we've increased the tax base by over $2 million. With multifamily development, we supported the construction of the 92-unit River Flats development. In 2024, we have over $1 million in home funds allocated towards a yet-to-be-named affordable housing development, and we have $1.2 million in home ARP funds. Our down payment and closing cost program is funded by the Home Investment Partnership. That grant program is up to $10,000 for income-eligible buyers. They must contribute at least $1,000 of their own funds, but then it's forgivable over 10 years, 5 years. So as long as they remain in the house, pay their taxes, pay their water bill, we forgive that $10,000. So what's next for housing services? We are embarking upon our 5-year consolidated plan. This is the umbrella plan that guides how we spend our federal dollars over the next 5 years. Some in this audience may be called upon to participate in focus groups so that we can determine what the best use of those funds are moving forward. We are also working on our affirmatively furthering fair housing, it's a mouthful, housing plan. It's also called the Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing. Basically, that's a document that guides how we support fair housing and how we work to make sure that everyone has the same access to housing. We will continue to work with developers to create affordable housing units in the city of Janesville. And we're going to think creatively about solutions for the housing crisis that we have here. That is all I have. Thank you.
Hey everybody, as Kevin said, I'm Adam Templer with Bear Development. I'm our Vice President of Development. I lead our affordable housing efforts. My background is I was a CPA for several years, so finance is my background, and transitioned into affordable housing development about 15 years ago. So in that time when I was starting to do affordable housing was during the 2008 financial crisis, so has kind of come full circle here recently with the challenges that we're facing back then, and now new challenges here recently with inflation and interest rates and COVID. So as Kevin said, Bear Real Estate Group, we're a fully integrated development company. I'm on the development side. We have a construction arm, property management, brokerage. If you drive around Kenosha, where we're based, you'll see Bear Realty signs all over, and that's really where the company got its start. We've been around for 100 years, and really brokerage was the start of that. So we continue over the years to do more complex developments. In that 2008 timeframe, when I started working with Bear, was when kind of development came to a stop, that the financial crisis happened, and at one of the only types of development that was happening was affordable housing, because there are a lot of state, local, and federal resources to develop affordable housing. So that's when Bear got into affordable housing. Since then, we've developed nearly 4,000 units. We develop roughly 1,000 units a year in our portfolio. We have about $1 billion worth of total development costs for affordable housing. So we've done a lot of it. There are a lot of challenges that go along with it, and I'm going to lead you through a couple of examples that we have today. I think really the crux of affordable housing and how it gets done is financing and being able to piece together the 5 to 10 layers of financing that are necessary to make one of these deals go. A couple of deals that we have up there are 402 Flats in Madison. It's a deal that it was an adaptive reuse, actually, of a building. The first 2 levels that you see there was an old office building that we reused and added onto. And another development on the bottom left is in Madison as well. I don't have slides on those, but one thing that's probably relevant to the group here today is something that they've done in Dane County as it relates to affordable housing with business groups like yourselves. They put together, they call it the Dane Workforce Housing Fund. And there have been a group of companies, it's been banks, been local companies that have workforce needs that are having trouble attracting talent to Madison and having a place for them to live. And they've put together, they're on their second fund right now, and they've put together $10 million funds that they put out to workforce housing developments. And they put the money out to the developments as a subordinate loan. Generally, it has 4 to 5% interest rate and has repayment from the cash flow from the development after the first mortgage. So it's been a really critical source to get a lot of developments done in the Dane County area. Both of these deals have those funds in them. It's roughly $1 million per development that goes into them, but it's been pretty successful in providing that critical resource for getting the financing done on these. Kind of a summary here of what I said. We've done several thousand units. Some of our recent deals, we've done some larger developments. One of the largest ones that we've done is in Milwaukee that I'll touch on. But for any of these developments, it's really a public-private partnership. They don't get done unless you have strong support from the municipality, the local municipality, the county. There are always entitlement issues Kevin mentioned before of Janesville going through changes to the zoning code. So there are a lot of hurdles and a lot of things that we hear from community when we come in with an affordable housing development, because people usually don't understand what it means to be affordable housing or workforce housing. So there's pushback many times for what is this going to do to my neighborhood? What is this going to do to property values? Generally, when we're doing affordable housing developments, it's picking up the area where it's located. Right, we're finding sites that are underutilized, and we're putting quality housing on them, and yes, they have some type of income restriction with them, but if you would drive past any of the housing developments that we've done, you would never notice, if it was affordable housing or market rate housing, and they're a great addition to the community. They have a positive impact. They spur development around it, so overcoming those kind of pushback from communities is often a challenge, just getting developments off the ground to get proper zoning in place. This is the development at Spring City Commons. It's located in Waukesha. I think it's a good example of some of the challenges that we come across, but also the support that's needed locally to get it done. We actually worked with Kevin in a prior life on this deal in Waukesha when he was there. These sites, you can't see it on the page here, but you can see it off page down to the right here. There was a manufacturing facility that had some environmental issues on it that we had gone through an extensive process with the DNR and locally for cleanup efforts. There was a bowling alley that used to be on this site that sat burned for several years, 5 years. So there's a fire in the bowling alley, an underutilized site, and it's right at a main corner in Waukesha, at the corner of Moreland and White Rock. So the site is a dilapidated site. There were a couple of houses that were on the site too that we acquired as part of this, but ultimately built. It's 72 units of housing. Is about a $15 million development. As we put together these developments, we often refer to it as lasagna financing because we just keep stacking the layers and layers and layers of financing on top of each other. We had in particular on this one, I'll go to the next slide where it lists it out. You can see at the top, this had federal, their 4% low-income housing tax credits. The state of Wisconsin has a great program for affordable housing as well that was approved a handful of years back that provides kind of a mirroring state of Wisconsin credit to the federal credit that has spurred a lot of workforce housing development. There were tax-exempt bonds. Any of the 4% deals are issued along with tax-exempt bonds. There was Home from Waukesha County. There was CDBG from Waukesha County. There was a grant from the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago as well. And then the city supported it with spot TIF. Because this was a dilapidated site, it is a developer-funded pay-go TIF that is also funding the development. So in this instance, there were 8 different sources of financing that came together to build this. And ultimately, it's been very successful. It's been leased up from day one. I think a great addition to the community. Through this corridor on White Rock, too, there's been a series of, I think Kevin just said, 10 to 15 additional houses that have been renovated and really spurred development through that corridor, which is what the city was looking for. I mentioned it before, but what we often see with this is because we're building very nice developments that there's not a market difference between this and market rate housing. The property owners that own kind of sea-level, housing that has been let go, not in the greatest condition, because rents are at the affordable new developments are similar to those we see investment, that people have to make in those properties then to try to keep up and be able to charge those same rents. So it really does spur, competition and spur additional investment in the community. Another development, this one we closed at the end of last year. This is located in Milwaukee. It was the largest workforce housing development that's been done in the state. It's a very large, old industrial manufacturing site in the city of Milwaukee. It sat vacant for many, many years. They used it as boat storage for a handful of years. It's a 10-acre site just south of Bayview in the Harbor District on Beecher and First Street. So this one in particular, again, a lot of challenges. There are environmental challenges with the site. There are a whole host of environmental grants or brownfield grants. There was a stormwater management grant, National Housing Trust funds, again, 4% tax credits. There's TIF from the city of Milwaukee. A total of $240 million. Because it's so many units, it's 576 units. So 2 of those buildings we reserve for seniors. We do a mix of senior and family housing. Usually with senior housing, we restrict to 55 plus. Sometimes it's 62 plus, depending on the other funding in place. 62 is the age that HUD looks to. But they're active communities. We see people move into these developments when they're in 50, 60 years old, and they stay there until they move on to some type of assisted facility. So this again has 144 senior units. It was also very important for the local alder to have some senior options. Another site, and this kind of speaks to our commitment to the affordable housing. We're working on a development in the city of Milwaukee. It was a site that was acquired from Marquette University. So affordable housing is kind of the first phase of this. We have 99 units of affordable housing, but ultimately this site is going to be a stadium, hotel, commercial space, additional housing. So we used a mix of, again, local grants, state grants, federal grants on the housing piece of this. And, I'd say our belief in affordable housing, our belief that affordable housing really is a positive addition to any of our developments, I think is really highlighted here because it's over a $200 million development. It's a stadium, it's a high-end hotel, it's going to be high-end housing, and our affordable housing development is the cornerstone for that, and it's going to be a really successful and important component of it. This one is a little better view of it. With top left is the housing, and then you can see the stadium. But on our developments, we really see a wide range of income and rent targeting. One of the developments that we did in downtown Kenosha a handful of years ago is called Fifth Avenue Lofts. At the time, there was no development in downtown Kenosha. New multifamily development just wasn't happening there. And the development that we did, it was utilizing 9% low-income housing tax credits, which skews to a little bit lower on the income bands because they're competitive. And at the time when we opened this up, we had rents that were from the lowest in downtown Kenosha of $350, $400 to the highest rents that are being achieved by any development in downtown Kenosha, all within the same building. It's about a third market rate and 2/3 affordable. But again, if you go to that area now in Kenosha, there are many other developments that are affordable. There are a lot of other market rate developments. The city just announced an initiative too that they have, I think it's another 150 units that they're starting construction on, with more to follow. So again, this affordable housing development was really an impetus for a lot of growth in that area, and really a market prover that you could achieve very high-end rents in Kenosha with a high-end product. So that's it for me. I think Kevin want to go through questions.
All right, I got some questions for these folks. We're gonna do this what is it, Today style? Today show? But I don't, the last Today Show host I remember is Katie Couric, but I don't think she's even current anymore. So I just wanted to expand on a couple of things, and this question is for Kelly. You serve a wide variety of folks for the city. Is there any common theme amongst the people that you serve? Is there any commonality that you see on a regular basis that kind of defines the folks that you're serving in your department?
Not necessarily. I would say that in our office, we see everyone. We may see someone who comes in our office who just lost their housing for whatever reason, but it doesn't mean that everyone who comes in our office with a housing concern is of low income. I think this problem that we have with housing runs the gamut from those who make, a very low income to those who are making substantial income but still can't find housing and can't find housing that's affordable for whatever their income is. I will tell you that the majority of the people, like I said in my presentation, that we serve through our rent assistance program are elderly or disabled, and we tend to be one of the only safety nets for those folks.
Thank you, Kelly. This question is for Adam. You mentioned up there the lasagna financing for affordable housing, and I know that in my conversations with you in the past, I'm always kind of amazed at how you piece together the funding for these projects. Can you just talk about why it's so difficult to put these projects together, and what does it take to get an affordable project across the finish line?
Sure, I touched on it a little bit. Strictly from a financing standpoint, like our challenge is it's not necessarily cheaper to build an affordable housing development like I had up there versus a market rate development. But in exchange for the tax credits, we are agreeing to put a cap on our rents and charge a certain level and restrict the incomes. The two different financing programs, one, there are 9% affordable housing tax credits, which are competitive once a year cycle with WIDA. Those provide roughly 60 to 70% of the financing needed for a development versus the 4% tax credits provide about 30 to 35% of the total capital stack. So on 9% deals, it's a very scarce resource. WIDA awards a handful of projects each year. They just don't go far. The state of Wisconsin gets roughly $12 million in credits, federal credits each year. So there are a handful of projects that get those. But for the 4% credits, which is what we primarily live in, we're trying to fill up the other 60% of that capital stack with debt, with grants, with TIF, with state resources, federal resources. And Kelly mentioned a little bit, but all of the resources generally come with some restrictions and some challenges in using them. That CDBG you can't use for X, but you can use for Y. Home you can use for Z, but you can't use for this. And all of them come with different income restrictions and income targeting requirements. So it's really trying to stack all of these financing together. What is available? What can be pieced together? How can those sources work together? Having a municipality that will work with you on how to structure this is really critical because of restrictions on use of funds. For CDBG as an example, if you can, you could use it on land acquisition, but you can't use it on the construction without triggering other requirements. So areas where cities have land banked sites that they want to see developed, areas where cities are willing to support with TIF on a pay-go and have some of these resources are really critical. So that's just on the financing side. And the entitlement side, we see just as many challenges because sites that we think are great and a great fit, we often get pushed back to say, well, we don't want that housing here. We don't want those people here. Like the reality is, this housing that we're building, these are all people that live in the community around this. Is just providing a better housing option for those people. Kind of the question that you asked before too, like our typical resident, like these are people with jobs, people with good jobs, people that are like paying their rent each month. It's that they're in the $40,000 to $70,000 of household income, and in many areas that's just not sufficient to buy a house. It's not sufficient to afford the housing that's available. It's not people that don't have jobs and aren't paying rent. It's just there's a lack of housing options that fit with where they are in the income band.
Kelly, you mentioned it a bit during your presentation, but can you just kind of expand a little bit on the programs that we're doing with local nonprofits to provide affordable housing, both rental and home ownership?
So we predominantly work with Wisconsin Partnership for Housing Development and I ran through the list of the types of projects they have, but they're building new constructions in our central city and infill lots. They own some rental properties that they own and operate, so they're here in our community. But in addition to that, we've done some work with Community Action. They've built a couple here in our community. And then we've worked with Echo on 2 homes. One is currently up and running as a transitional living unit. And then the second one, hopefully, Jessica, within 2 weeks, 2 weeks, we'll have that one up and running as well. So that was a complete gut rehab. That was a project that came back to us on tax foreclosure. We had offered it to one nonprofit, and they were not interested in the rehab of the property. So we're working with Jessica to do a second home that she can then house people who are in transition from homelessness to housing. So that one is very exciting. The house is going to be beautiful when it's done. And then the other nonprofit that we work with and are just starting to work with is Axe Housing. They are based out of Milwaukee, but also have an office in Beloit. They work with households who have lower incomes to purchase homes. Sometimes the individual does, or the household does the renovation. Other times, Axe does the renovation and then sells the home to that income qualified family.
Thank you, Kelly. Adam, can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned the Madison program, about unique local government or local partnerships that you've seen that's working in other communities?
Yeah, I think the Dane Workforce Fund that I mentioned before is probably the most relevant example for those here, in that it is the primary driver and the people that have invested in this fund. One is banks, local banks. Banks have CRA needs through the Community Reinvestment Act. So by them putting money into this fund and then that fund going into affordable housing developments, they get credit for their CRA requirements locally. And then also it's businesses that just their workers are having a hard time finding a place to live locally. So they've contributed money to this fund in an effort to create more workforce housing options. So again, the money, it's not free money to a developer. They put it out at just a lower interest rate. Their rate is somewhere from 4 to 5.5%. They just raised their second fund. I think each fund was about $10 million, and they've done a handful of projects now. So it's really like local business leaders who recognize the need in the community and a way to get that out. There's a local nonprofit developer in Madison, the Madison Development Corp, that runs the fund for them. They have a board and they have various people locally that provide advice to them. But that's a great example of, it's not federal, it's not state resource, it's just local companies that came together to provide.
Thanks, Sam. And I have one more question, because this is always the one that just befuddles me when it comes to financing. How do you take a 4% tax credit or a 9% tax credit? What exactly does that mean, and how does that turn into money to the developer?
Yeah, maybe. All right, so maybe this is the easiest way to show it. So the tax credits that were mentioned, there are 2 types of low-income housing tax credits that are federal code. One is a 4% tax credit. So each state gets a certain amount of tax-exempt bond volume cap. If the state issues tax-exempt bonds or allocates tax-exempt bonds to a project and they pay for half of their project costs with tax-exempt bonds, this 4% tax credit is generated. So when you see up on the screen, it's on the top left, investor member federal LIHTC. LIHTC stands for low income housing tax credit. For this development, that was $15 million. There was $4.2 million of tax credit equity. The equity, where that's coming from, is the project gets a tax credit from the federal government. It's a 10-year tax credit. And then we go out and we find an investor for that. Investors are primarily banks, again, with CRA need, Community Reinvestment Act need. So the bank takes rough numbers. They get $5 million of total credits, and they pay $4.2 million for that. So it's roughly 90 cents on the dollar for the tax credit. And then they own the property for 15 years because there's a 15-year compliance period related to it. The second line up there, the line right under that, is the state LIHTC. So the state of Wisconsin, recognizing again a need for affordable housing, workforce housing, they created a program that mirrors the federal program. So the state of Wisconsin's credit it's a state credit. It's delivered over 6 to 7 years, and that goes against the company's state of Wisconsin tax liability. Again, a lot of banks use these, insurance companies, large companies. So they, in exchange for the tax credits they got, they put $2 million into the development. So on this deal, between the state and federal equity, it was roughly $6 million of equity in the deal. The investors generally they're in it for the tax credits and the tax benefits like depreciation. And then after the 15-year compliance period, the property reverts back to the owner. Another type of credit is 9% tax credit. Those are the state of Wisconsin. It's a federal resource. The state of Wisconsin gets about $12 million of tax credits each year, and they put those out on a competitive basis. So each year, roughly 50 groups will put in applications for these federal tax credits, and 10 to 12 of those get selected. The big benefit of those 9% tax credits is if it's a $15 million development, $11 million roughly of that would be paid for through tax credit equity. So it really narrows the gap. When we had on this deal in particular, TIF and home funds and CDBG and an AHP grant, you need fewer of those other resources, or a smaller percentage of the total capital stack needs to be paid for because more comes from those tax credits. But they're state and federal credits.
Thank you. He explains it to me, and I just get more confused. But that's why he's a CPA, and I'm not. So this is the audience participation portion of the program. So Nick is going to provide the microphone to you. So if you have any questions for our panel, please raise your hand, and he will bring you the microphone.
Hey,
So we got one.
count on Mick.
So when you're using the LIHTC credits, is there a mix between affordable and market rate housing that you have to meet? Or if you do a mixed development like that, how does that apply?
Sure, you only get tax credits on units that are restricted. So in the Kenosha example that I gave, where we had 1/3 of our units were market rate and 2/3 were affordable, on that 1/3 of units, we didn't generate tax credits on. For the 9% credits, there are scoring criteria, so usually you end up with roughly 15% of your units that will be market rate, 85% low income. But those are usually skewed a little bit lower on the income bands to the 30% units, 50% units as a percentage of area median income. For the 4% credits, in order to maximize the credits, it's generally 100% affordable, but there was new legislation that was passed that allows you to put rents up to 80% of the area median income. So there you see a wider range of incomes, but they're all affordable with an average of roughly 60% of the area median income.
First, this was really informative, so thank you. Appreciated the information before. What we've been talking about is market interventions. In the ideal state, we don't have that, right? There's equilibrium, supply equals demands, and we have the right price that the consumers at different levels can purchase. We see that in other industries. In your perspective, especially Kelly, you've been at this for 22 years. Is this a supply issue? Is this our incomes need to go up? Where do you see equilibrium happening? And so that's my question.
Yes, I think it's all of the above. I don't know that any of us have the silver bullet answer to how we hit equilibrium. I think we definitely do not have the supply. We think we're at about a 1% vacancy rate, and that's based on extrapolating some data from census and then just some real life experience. But I don't think we have enough supply. I think because of that, I only took Econ 101 in college, but when we don't have that supply, then the prices are going to go up. And so especially with rental properties, because that's typically what we deal with mostly, but with rental properties, landlords are able to get a higher rate at this point because, obviously they're in a business, and if there's not a lot around, they can certainly charge more. And so unfortunately, those who are affected by that the most are the ones who have the lowest income in our community. I spoke to a woman, she came in after close last Friday, and I could hear her sobbing in our lobby. And so I went out there and I said, "What's going on?" And she works. She's a single mom. She works 40 plus hours a week. She makes $19 an hour. She can't make her rent. That's the reality of it, is that it's those folks who are working hard who just can't make their ends meet because of the cost of what housing is now. I think solution-wise, we need more units, period. And at all of the different levels of units. We hoped, as we saw some of the more expensive units be developed, that we would have a bit of a trickle down. But I think, unfortunately, what we're seeing in some of those higher rent units is we're seeing a lot of folks who don't live in, or who don't work in this community, and so they're living here, but then they're driving to Madison or Rockford. So we're drawing those folks in as well.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Adam, for joining us this morning. Thank you all for attending our Leaders Breakfast. I hope that it's informative to you. We're going to continue to have these on a quarterly basis, and you all behaved appropriately, so you're all invited back. So thank you, and have a great rest of your day.